Thing out, write this thing out, yeah. So we're not in the business of trying to make different now. No, we're not in the business of trying to make different now. No, yeah. Instead of peddling out far, taking it to reach farther away. The music, the highly rock shall come on up.
1212 Radio Culture. Yes, indeed. Welcome to the bi-weekly lecture of the Rastafari Council of Ghana. Today's lecture is on the topic. Today's lecture, actually, I should say, is delivered by Dr. Kwadwo Oppong Wadie and Kwasi Anokye, 7 Fireside. For the first time since my experience with the bi-weekly, I was about to say bi-weekly lectures, we are going to have 2 speakers for today, Kwadwo Oppong Wadie, Dr. Kwadwo Oppong Wadie, and 7 Fireside, Kwasi Anokye, Kwasi Anokye. It's on the topic 1960 report on Rastafari African Perspectives on the effect of the movement. We'll be crossing over shortly to that lecture. In the meantime, enjoy some spot of music. As soon as the lecture starts, we'll be crossing over. One love.
Just make different now. No, we're not in the business of trying to make different now.
Radio culture. Right now.
How you tell yourself that liberation. Who the driver? Who the rider? Even peace and love go beef with the world, yeah. And if they took it out on each other, you know something wrong with understanding. Anokye antics, tactics, rebel in self-love. Ambition's fame is more of the same. 1600 stories, I get it. You want to belong, memories, nostalgia, childhood assumption. What's in your game? Johnny, headless one, no monarchy was your intellect. As if this girl's intelligence could protect moments of the history that we don't forget. Rastafari rifle the people just with fresh connect. Is it starting to make some sense? Unexpected places sing to Lord Horsey High. How you remember this year's setbacks, liberation. How you tell yourself to come back. Situation at sunset rising up this precision transmitting energy. Decision transmitting a change. Childhood assumption, Buddha watching, Buddha smarter, a wisdom pot, and I'm saying
specific problems and their considered views on courses of action to best follow. So for tonight, we seek to stimulate creative thinking with the topic at hand. Tonight, it will be a panel conversation being led by Kwasi, Anokye, and Dr. Oppong Wadie. The topic for tonight is excuse me, please.
Right move, lead.
Yes.
Right move, lead.
The 19th African Perspectives on the effects
Recording
on
in
the
progress.
movement. And so we are going to have an African perspective on the effect on the movement of the 1960 report on Rastafari. And this conversation will be led by Kwasi, Anokye, and Dr. Oppong Wadie. I would like to remind I that this conversation is also live on Radio Culture and will be made available on the Rastafari Council Ghana YouTube channel as well. So I hereby invite Dr. Kwadwo Oppong Wadie and Kwasi Anokye to take the floor. Give thanks.
Give thanks. Are they come through? You hear me?
Right move, lead.
Thanks.
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Interesting topic we handled today. Basically, we discussed the 1960, what they call the Rastafari movement in Jamaica. No, the Rastafari movement in Kingston, Jamaica report. That's what it was called. It was published by the University College of West Indies, and the authors were Michael Smith, who was an anthropologist, right? So we read things in terms of, just be how human beings should behave. That's his focus, right? Then you got Rex Nettleford and Roy Oppong, and the two other guys were supporting Michael. This was basically Michael Smith's idea. We'll discuss him as a person maybe later on. After Prof Oppong Wadie has taken us into what the report was really about. But I'll just share a few thoughts, quick remarks, and then we'll get into the report itself. Okay, one thing that happened was as soon as it was published, it was mass produced. As soon as the report was published, it sold out real fast. Some people were buying it and reselling it. It was going real fast. It needed to get on some reprints immediately, and it was important. It was a very timely thing. People were interested in knowing about Rasta because Rasta was like a strange thing to a lot of people. So here was a people that Jamaica couldn't understand, and finally here was a document by scholars, that anyone could read and understand. Right? It wasn't too long. The language was regular, and it seemed to explain who and what Rastafari was or is. They actually said it was based on interviews with Rastas, and that it was initiated. The project was initiated by Rastas, so it sounded very genuine. Like this is what people wanted to know. It sounded like first-hand information, more or less. So the readership was obviously, for the people that wrote it, was government officials, the general public, police, journalists, media personnel, academics, and we'll talk about implications of that later, and Rasta people. Yes, Rasta people are going to read about themselves. Okay. The objective, as we'll find out, would be was to change public perceptions of Rasta people, for the better, as far as they understood better, and change Rasta's perceptions of themselves too. Those unstated. So that's another thing we'll discuss. Basically, it was a classical psychological operation. When you go up against the state, if you just study history, Martin Luther King, Mao, wherever, you go up against the system, you go against the state, they neutralize your fight, then they absorb you into the system, and then they claim and celebrate you as their hero and start to explain you on your terms. And that's another thing we love to touch on. There are a lot of lessons in it in terms of Rasta's relationship with the state. And when I say the state, I mean that apparatus that is able to unleash force or make decisions, executive decisions that affect people's lives. So we can think of the state as it's the people and all that, but actually it's a state that the government goes to sort of be the driver of the state, calling the shots. So that's what I mean by the state. So here we know that right now in Ghana, for instance, there's this idea of Rastas finding a seat at the table to engage with the state and all that. So there's some lessons to be learned from this. So Rasta's relationship with the state, understand our understandings of politics and economics, and our understandings of our relationship with Christianity, which is a major thing for Rasta people to think about, because the Rasta people who identify almost without any modification with Christianity. The report addressed a serious political problem. Proclaiming Haile Selassie as King of Kings was a serious political problem at that time. Queen of England was supposed to be the monarch, and so people were like, we don't care about that, we worship the King of Ethiopia. We're rejecting the Jamaican identity by emphasizing an African identity. They're talking about repatriation, but leaving behind Jamaica, we're going to Africa. There was no talk of brand Jamaica back then. They were looking to Africa. They knows that from Leonard Howell's time, their generation till the 60s, looked like Rasta people were not limiting their tools to nonviolence, right? They were firing in all cylinders, right? Diplomacy, they'll do diplomacy. Become hostile, they'll be hostile, So at that point, just before the report was released, the Minister of Home Affairs, which in Ghana would be like, say, the Minister of Interior, had put out a statement like, the Rastafarian movement has been an increasing security threat in Jamaica. So that is the key thing. Take some look at some statements by the governor at that time. Said something like, they realized that it used police force to try to suppress the movement. It wasn't working, so it was time to use sociological means. So the report comes in handy, right? Michael Smith, the anthropologist we talked about, who was the one that was pushing this idea, said the government has recognized that it is not sufficient to control the situation solely by repressive police measures. It was time to shatter the organization by reforms leading to the social rehabilitation of the elements of the Rastafari movement. Okay, so basically, let's look at the context. It was supposed to be Jamaica's independence, right? So they were worrying about their national identity, how to stick together. They needed stability, and Rasta didn't seem to be playing along with that thing. Rasta was talking about something that felt destabilizing, right? Rastas were looking to Africa, to the African king. African liberation struggles, which were not necessarily nonviolent things, right? Selassie was supporting and encouraging total struggle for African independence, as we would call it. Mau had just happened in the 1950s, armed warfare. Ghana had been granted its independence, but in South Africa, armed warfare, in Kontoga Sizwe. And these were things Rastas were engaged in, we're talking about. Zimbabwe, armed warfare. Mozambique, armed warfare. Cape Verde, Algeria, so if you look at Africa, you see things that could be destabilizing to Babylon. This was a problem to Babylon, Neo is here, the civil rights movement, Malcolm X, right? Obviously, we know say he wasn't limiting himself to what they said was how we're supposed to address our problems. Martin Luther King supporting armed struggles outside. Professor Manuel Pim has done some work on that. Stokely Carmichael was there speaking, talking about total struggle too. Between just recently in the Caribbean, Cuba had just sort of like actualized this revolution. They had fought between 53 and 59, and now they were in charge. Castro and his crew were in charge. And remember, this is a Cold War period. You either were inside of the West or inside of the East. Castro was a problem to the West. And it looked like Rasta people were more, to use the fancy word, amenable to what Castro represented in the East. So that was a problem right there. The year before the report was released, there was an incident at Coronation Market where police was messing with Rasta and things blew up. People attack the police. Police come, they fight police. Police do a lot of damage. They do some damage. This was destabilizing, Same year, there was a Reverend Claudius Henry in the African Reformed Church. And he was pushed for repatriation, but he wasn't going to go about it. He didn't seem to want to go about it on, cordial terms with the system. He was making demands and he looked like he was getting ready for an armed struggle. So he got arrested and charged for treason. And while he was in detention, his son, came from the U.S. to Jamaica with a bunch of other, soldiers. They called to join the First Africa Corps. And there was an incident in an area called Red Hills, where they actually were here in Jamaica to have some military moves. And the details of it are a bit fussy, but generally the idea was we're trying to, force the Jamaican government to make certain concessions to Rasta people in terms of repatriation. And then there were things in connection to his dad's idea. His name was Reynald Henry. His dad was Claudius Henry. His dad's ideas. Some of the letters they said he had written were to Castro in Cuba, and the idea was like he was going to hand over Jamaica to Castro to run and all that. Sounds a little absurd, but these are some of the things that we're going to go. But here was a military operation being carried out by his son while he was in detention, right? Serious problem. Actually, the Jamaican government's response to this was called the Operation Rasta, literally military operation, because there was some, they were surprised. They found themselves confronting government soldiers, and they had to, take out some people and fight them. And it became an issue. Like they had to, there was a manhunt. It was a big thing in the news. Matter of fact, some people, it was one of the biggest things in terms of, insurgency, armed sense, and they called that operation against them Operation Rasta, right? So this is what the public is hearing. Rasta posed a national security threat, more or less. So the Ministry of Interior for them, what they call the Home Affairs Ministry, set up something called the Rasta Rehabilitation Committee. And we're looking for ideas and people who could find a way to, kind of like diffuse the tension, right? And actually another name for that committee was the Rastafari Problem Committee. And they were working on what they called Operation Rehabilitation, and which was so tied to the idea of mission to Africa because Rastas wanted to leave. If Rastas left, that would be good for them, right? And rehabilitation was definitely what they needed while Rastas were in Jamaica. And as Rex Nettleford, one of the authors, the co-authors, would say, Rastas were flattered enough to accept the official offer and opportunity to return to Africa, which in a sense diffused their fire, So basically, I will hand this over to Professor Kwadwo Oppong Wadie, because he's going to give us some insights. And please, let's pay attention because he's going to give us good insights that we can use for some solid reasons after this.
Radio culture.
Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, give thanks, Ras, Kwasi, Anokye, for that, wonderful introduction to this very important topic. I think that you've said everything already. There is really no need to add anything, but just for the purpose of putting certain things in context and also amplifying a little bit about the importance of this report and its implications and by extension, the effects Rastafari, it is important to also articulate a few things. So in terms of the context, right, I want to say a little bit about the fact that a few things have been happening in Jamaica. We see 1927, Marcus Garvey had been deported from the United States to Jamaica. And when he got to Jamaica, he hit the road right away, seriously organizing the UNIA. So that also provided fertile grounds for what was to come later on. 1932, we see Leonard Howell also deported from the United States to Jamaica. Leonard Howell also hit the ground running right away when he arrived in Jamaica, and expanded, laid down the foundations for Rastafari movement, and also expanded Rastafari movement. Now, in 1958, it says 1948. That correct should be 1958. In 1958, Prince Emmanuel Charles Edwards, the founder of the Bobo Shanti, called for an all-island-wide Rastafari convention, which lasted for days. And, this also was very concerning to the government, which the government tried at this convention to kind of taunt Rastafari, to provoke Rastafari, to seek some kind of response from Rastafari. Some Rastafari responded, as Kwasi Anokye pointed out. Rastafari was not operating on the basis of non-violence alone. Non-violence tactics were used when necessary, but when other tactics were also necessary, those tactics were used. So this was also part of what occurred during the convention called by Prince Emmanuel. And then the peacemakers, led by Reverend Claudius Henry, the following year, 1959, saw a confrontation with the Jamaican government. And here we see, as Kwasi Anokye has very nicely laid out, his son returning from the United States with some other military people who came and were seeking to engage in some kind of confrontation with the Jamaican government. The Jamaican government intervened and literally executed Reverend Henry's son with the other people who were working with him. It is important to point out that the peacemakers are still in existence. It's quite ironic that most of the time we don't hear of their name when we're talking about, Rastafari mansions and so forth. But the organization set forth by Reverend Claudius Henry and his wife, Edna Henry, peacemakers are still very much active and alive in Jamaica today, in Clarendon. So these events were giving the Jamaican government cause for concern. They knew who Rastafari was, but at the same time, they were against Rastafari, as you can imagine, because, Jamaican government at that time, Bustamante and all these people were very heavy Western-leaning monarchical British subjects. And Rastafari, looking forward to Africa, was at variance with what kind of ideology they wanted to pursue for the people of Jamaica. So in 1960, the Rastafari report was released. This report was said to have been requested or initiated by Rastafari brethren, and it was put forward by the University College of West Indies, which is today the University of West Indies. There are certain aspects that we want to delve into a little bit, because this report also laid the foundation for what became known as the Mission to Africa, which occurred the following year, 1961, where we had government officials together with Rastafari brethren travel from Jamaica to 5 countries in Africa, including Ghana, where they met with a surgical Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. In all these countries, in Ethiopia, they also met with His Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I. And in all these countries, the report indicated that all countries were positive and receptive towards the idea of repatriation. Now, I'll talk a little bit about Prince Emmanuel's 1958 convention. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, the Jamaican government taunted Rastafari during this convention. They were seeking some kind of provocation to kind of point to the people that didn't even tell you that these people are dangerous, right? So here in the report, there is that articulation of this idea that the antisocial elements of Rastafari were heavily present during this 1958 convention. And there were two cases that occurred in Trenchtown, according to this report, in which Rastafari members were said to have thrown children into fire as sacrifices.
Radio culture.
This whole idea of portraying Rastafari to the general public as some kind of dangerous element also was a strong part of this 1960 report. So look at the report in itself. According to the University College of West Indies, which carried out this, which put out this report, the aim was to study and provide a brief account of the growth, the doctrines, the organization, the aspirations, the needs and conditions of the Rastafari movement. Now, this, as we can see, is as we progress, can be questioned, right? What was the real aim? We're going to try to talk about that. And given the fact that a year after this report was issued and the Rastafari mission was undertaken from Jamaica to Africa, on the way from Jamaica to Africa, the brethren had to transit in England. And while they were in England, brothers Fillmore Avaranga and Douglas Mack wrote a letter, at least two letters to the Queen of England, articulating the needs and the immediate aspirations of Rastafari. So I'm saying that to say that Rastafari could articulate their own needs, their own conditions, their own aspirations without the necessary participation of the University College of West Indies. And this will become important in a minute as we continue to talk about it. Now, as Kwasi Anokye pointed out earlier on, according to the University College of West Indies, the survey that informed the report arose out of letters that were written to the principal of the University College of West Indies, who at that time was Professor Arthur Lewis, and the resident tutor, Mr. Rex Nettleford, by members of the Rastafari Brethren living in Kingston. So here, the onus is put on in the initiation of this report on the Rastafari Brethren. And this is important because we seek to question that. So, what are some questions that arise out of this report, and what are some questions that are related to the authenticity of the process, the survey that informed this report? According to the survey, the request was put forward by some prominent members of the Rastafari community. The question is, who are these prominent members? These brethren have never been identified, even to date. We don't know who these prominent members who initiated this survey were. The survey arose out of letters written by Rastafari Brethren. These letters have never been seen or been made public. According to the survey, these letters this correspondence took place over a 2-week period. And in the writings of Dr. Robert Hill, who has also responded to these aspects of the report, says that it was dictated in one night to the wife of Smith, as we're going to find out. So was the conceptualization of this report fraudulent in some ways? These are questions that we seek answers to. And here we see Dr. Robert Hill, quote from him, saying that in a meeting held in my office at UCLA, UCLA is university in Los Angeles, California, in 1978, M.G. Smith, who was then visiting UCLA with his wife, told me, Robert Hill, that the report was actually dictated to Mary, his wife, over the course of a single night. So that goes in contradiction to the fact that the survey indicated that the report was the result of letters and correspondence that occurred between prominent Rastafari members and the university community over a 2-week period. Now, Dr. Robert Hill assesses the report. And the first problem is what he refers to as the so-called provenance of the report. And quote, he says, this survey arose out of letters written to the principal of UCWI, Professor Arthur Lewis, and to the resident tutor extramural studies, Mr. Rex Nettleford, by members of the Rastafari Brethren living in Kingston. The report claimed these letters asked the college to assist the Brethren in various ways, especially in the educational field, and by publicizing the truth about the Brethren and their doctrine. According to Robert Hill, after 5 years of researching the report, he had not found any such letters, though he found numerous letters written by various brethren, but all those letters were dated after the commencement of the research on which this report was issued on July 5th. So Hill continues to assess the report by saying that it represented a plural society document, something that was reflected in the distinctive theory of M.G. Smith, who sought to articulate the idea of cultural pluralism in the Caribbean. In other words, the Caribbean being a grounds where different cultures were existing and living together side by side, with these inflections about the clash of cultural segments and the potential that it created for societal breakdown. In other words, the fact that Rastafari was being identified as a culture on its own was being projected in this 1960 report as a culture that had the potential of bringing about the breakdown of societal governance in Jamaica and by extension the Caribbean. What I have concluded is that the story of the letters is a fairy tale. It served as a propaganda ploy that was meant to disguise the real motive behind the university's investigation of the Rastafari movement. So the question needs to be asked: what was the real motive behind the university's investigation? And so the answer to that question has been partially given, but we will proceed as we look at the effects of this report. So one of the things that comes out in this report was related to Rastafari attitude to work. And according to the report, though the attitudes of Rastafarians are similar, the Brethren differ from the rest of the population in that a much larger proportion are unemployed. Not because Rastafarians are difficult to employ, but because it is the unemployed who are most easily attracted to the movement. I think that we can all question this statement heavily, and especially since we see that the report also extends this statement by saying that if the supply of jobs in Kingston were to catch up with the demand for jobs, a hard core of religious belief would remain, but the movement would cease to have mass significance. So the question that we ask is, did the government and subsequent governments of countries, including Jamaica, intentionally attempt to stifle the development of the Rastafari movement by denying members of the movement jobs? I think that the answer to this is not far-fetched. Based on their own statement in the report, they were going to try to starve the movement out by denying members jobs, by extension not making it attractive to people who wanted to be employed, and that there was going to remain a core, hardcore, central religious or spiritual belief, but for the most part, it was going to die out. Now, is there any justification for this? There is justification provided in the document itself, where the document states that in every part of the world, including Africa, I like that, they put including Africa as a way of justifying their actions. People who insist on looking different from their fellow men tend to be persecuted by their fellow men. The question is, how true is this? I mean, that is not necessarily a fact, especially when you look at it from the African perspective. We have always had people in different segments of the society who look different, but that has not necessarily been the basis for persecution. This kind of basis provided for persecution of people who look different has been one that has been largely articulated by the colonial structure, which always sees difference as a problem. Now, another effect has been the attitude of Rastafari towards the government and the state. And this is simply because the document also, made it seem as if it was Rastafari which was asking the university to write this report. And subsequent engagement with the report has taken everything that the report has said at face value, including from Rastafari community. And one of the things that the report sought to articulate was that Rastafari was seeking acceptance from the government of Jamaica and from the people of Jamaica. And this is a idea that continues to plague Rastafari to this day. Some Rastafari have adopted the position of seeking acceptance, and this is something that can also be attributed to statements made in this report. Another way that the report sought to project Rastafari, as we have even seen previously in some of the quotations that have been expressed, include positioning Rastafari as some kind of violent movement. According to the report, and I quote, according to the account in the Times, the Ethiopian emperor was head of the Nyabingi order, the purpose of which was the overthrow of white domination by racial war. This violent note had already been struck by Howell, and Nyabingi was defined in Jamaica as death to black and white oppressors. Some of those who worshipped the emperor and were locally known as Rastafaris or Rasta men came to describe themselves as Nyamen, that is, members of Nyabingi. The Nyabingi commitment to racial violence generalized the violence already preached by Howell. But the question is, did Howell preach violence? Did Nyabingi preach violence? None of these elements, none of these, members of Rastafari, Leonard Howell and Nyabingi, made violence as their preoccupation. These Leonard Howell and Nyabingi operated largely in a peaceful atmosphere. It was only when they were provoked that they also responded in the same manner that the provocation came through. But this report sought to typify all Rastafari as violence. Were there some positives? Well, there were a lot of recommendations made in the document. And one of those were that some teachers cut the hair of Rastafari children, so the parents react by keeping the children away from school. Some of these parents are asking for special schools for their Rastafari children. But according to the report and according to the government, in association with the University College for West Indies, there was a much simpler remedy. The Minister of Education should prohibit teachers from cutting the hair of children without their parents' permission. Now, the question needs to be asked, how successful has such a recommendation been since this recommendation was made in 1960, as we see that even though by and large in Jamaica, most schools will not cut children's hair who are Rastafari, we still from time to time hear of instances in which Rastafari children are either asked to leave school or cut their hair. Now, the report also seemed to have sought a divide and rule strategy to divide and rule Rastafari by suggesting that there was a moderate segment of the Rastafari brethren, and that this is the kind of segment that they were the government, that is, to reach out to. Now, suggesting that there was a moderate segment also, by extension, meant that there was a violent segment, there was an antisocial segment that had to be done away with.
Culture.
Sought to use the Ethiopian World Federation in Jamaica as an arm to kind of control Rastafari in Jamaica by seeking the expansion of the Ethiopian World Federation, something which did not come to pass. So as I alluded to in the earlier discussion, the 1961 Mission to Africa came out of this report. The Mission to Africa in 1961 was largely financed by the government of Jamaica. So the question needs to be asked, what was the true purpose of the Mission to Africa? Was the government of Jamaica seeking to do away with what it considered to be undesirable elements in Jamaican society by sending these people to Africa, especially since it was on the heels of the convention called for by Prince Emmanuel, and also the confrontation between the peacemakers led by Reverend Claudius Henry and his son Reynold Henry and the Jamaican army. According to Michael Barnett, who is a Rastafari scholar, thus after the publication of the Rastafari report, an African fact-finding mission was organized in 1961 following the first recommendation of the university report. So here Michael Barnett is basically stating that there is no question that the Mission to Africa was carried out as a result of the report that was put forth in 1960 by the University College of West Indies. So here we have an image of the brethren who were on the report. They were in Ethiopia, they were in Nigeria, they were in Ghana, they were in Liberia, and they were in one other country that I kind of recall off the top of my head. But here we have Douglas Mack and Fillmore Avaranga and one other brethren in the image that we see here of the Mission to Africa. So, according to Dr. Robert Hill, looking at what the true purpose of this report might have been, he poses an idea that it may have simply been a counter-insurgency document, something that was being used to control the Rastafari population in Jamaica and to steer and shape the future of the movement. So according to Dr. Robert Hill, however, if the true purpose of the report was security related, then the urgency and haste with which it was undertaken becomes understandable. And remember, we talked about it being dictated over the course of the night to the wife of M.G. Smith. In my opinion, that is Robert Hill's opinion, that was exactly what happened. It was, in the sense, a classic counterinsurgency operation masquerading as a university-sponsored investigation. So, moving on, we're gonna talk a little bit, open it up. What does this mean for Rastafari engagement with the public and the state? What impact has the report had on Rastafari studies, general Rastafari literature, etc.? And what were some unintended consequences and possibilities of the 1960 report on Rastafari? I'm going to call in Kwasi Anokye to come in. Give thanks, Rastafari.
Culture. Solid. Since you see the possibilities, though they tried to contain Rasta, for that. Are they come true? You hear me? Yeah.
True.
Yes, so people go Africa, they get a chance to, on the mission, they got to meet Slutzy, right? One of the brethren they talked to, they had a majority report. Most of the people on the mission were not living as Rasta, but they had a minority in there, right?
Yep.
And turns out they said when they got to His Majesty presence, His Majesty did with them as a group, and then the rest leave, and His Majesty spent time with a Rasta man there.
True.
3 Rasta man.
True.
And hard to call.
True.
Slutzy, pay attention to them, listen to them. They talk about brother way. The police come kill him or something. But Slutzy say, hey, what happened to him? He could do whatever he could do to help the brethren. One brethren gives His Majesty something. His Majesty say, you made this yourself? Hard to call, one-on-one. You know, so they experience, they live that thing, you know, and then they say, well, the day Ethiopia, one baby said they were interacting with people where it was something that someone was wanted someone to show them. I think a photo or something, correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone has seen this. And the person don't want to show the person the thing, where they beg him in the name of Selassie, say, in the name of Selassie, show me the thing. So the Rastaman from Jamaica come to see how the people from Ethiopia, they understand a king. True. The king of kings. You know. So yeah, all these things are crucial because I would love if we talk about the African understand, the African ways we can understand kings. Right? Which is not necessarily how people in Jamaica were exposed to the exposure we get in terms of people's relationship with the king. And I think to emphasize African understanding, so the African worldview, Africans' relationship with our kings will help us, you know, tighten up or, you know, refine our understanding what we mean by Rastafari, so that we're not going to need to go through a Bible to justify who His Majesty be. Because this is how we live, you know. I'm going to have discussions with Rascal Santa where you could say things like, if you hear say, on my hand for a while, Charlie, full speed. You know, what sit down and say, make I think about myself, say, you go wrong. On my hand, so think about, I ain't for hand and kasa. True. You know, so things like that, you know, so I love that part. So they got exposed to that. They go Ghana to, you know, the other day in another conversation about how they go Ghana, they run into Rasta people were hailing His Majesty. Yeah, man. Right. Which means we appreciate the things the Brethren for Jamaica bring on us, and they put us on the map. They give us things to work with, to defend what we stand for. Before we respect that and preserve that and honor that. But on the continent of Africa, if I think about our relationship with Selassie, because as soon as they crown His Majesty, people start worship Him for Ethiopia. And the thing reverberates through Africa. There were people who did not know what happened in the Caribbean who did worship Selassie as God of gods. Right? Somehow that has been sidelined. And it's become like, oh yeah, this is it. Nah, Africans were already worshiping Selassie as God of gods, not just in Ethiopia. You know, so those are some of the things if we talk about, maybe you want to talk about how Nkrumah engaged with the Brethren too when the time to come Ghana in terms of the mission, you know. So those are some of the things man the things we think about. And maybe you'll give us a chance to tighten our understanding of this whole, is Rasta a Christian thing, you know, and when it comes to even Christianity, this whole, how they drop the idea of liberation theology, what has come to be known as Black liberation theology, right? Which now 10 of them that they do, they don't even think about that as Black liberation. They say, I read the Bible, God say, I don't tolerate this thing. Yeah, so I'm gonna make this move. I read that man there, you know, Kimati them more, they need to carry Bible. But if you see the way that they operate, and stand around talking peace and love. So yeah, you know, if they Abrofor take over, they forgive up, you know, if I go negotiate with them, I could make the right petition. You know, yeah. So so that has been dropped. You know, I was reading a document where they took the Rasta to deal with liberation theology, but then they try to talk about the Rasta is non-violent. I think you don't have to talk about that. So the idea of, is it this or is it that? All these things are moot. You know, treat people correctly and we'll have to deal with this question. So that's one area I'm seeing. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, Prof, on that, if you want to build on that. If you could get into who was impressed by this report and who wasn't. You already give us Professor Hill in angle, right? Yeah, a couple people responded, but he be the one where really go out to work. You wrote a book dealing with it, right? Right. Yeah, so can you take us there? Take us there a little bit. Like, why? Radio culture. Transcendent online. Most other wrestlers, according to Neto Ford, after this thing, he talks, most wrestlers were happy about the report. But the problem is, Chinese people don't talk about all the wrestlers in Jamaica. They didn't even talk to anybody. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing you're talking about. So what if they really spoke to Rasta people, you know? And but yeah, go ahead and go to touch on the things like who thought this was good? Society, Rasta people, government, police. Who was it good for? And then you go to talk about things where people say against it. And also, if you have a chance, maybe you can come back to that later. Why do you think, say, Rastafari studies, miss this point until people like Hildem stand up? Because he did like some two himself say affect them the first time I read it. And they read Charles Price, he do some phenomenal work on Rasta. Wait till they say, the time you hear that, you read the report, you believe say this be the thing. But he to find out saying, yeah, totally, yeah, and Charlie, they can go there small, talk about these things, why, who liked it, who appreciated why, and who didn't, and why.
True.
Or take the way you want to go with it,
Yeah, man, give thanks for that vibe. I think that first of all, if we ask the question, who appreciated this report, we also have to ask another question, who benefited from this report?
That's what I mean. Yes.
And by and large, the people who benefited from it was the government of Jamaica, the Queen of England, who's by extension the head of state of Jamaica, and the imperial organization. But the government, as we saw, not only wanted to use this report as something they just wanted to say about Rastafari, but as a way of also shaping the future of the movement, right? Kind of cooling the movement down, so to speak, kind of quashing the movement, so to speak, kind of, and that this also feeds into even the whole invitation that was given to His Majesty to come to Jamaica in 1966, because the government was looking at it differently. The government of Jamaica was looking at it from the point of view that, well, we're going to bring this man here, and all these Rasta people are going to see that, he's just like them, and there is no point in thinking of him as no King of Kings or God of Gods, something like that. So they were looking at it from that perspective. They were also looking at it from the perspective that His Majesty will come and then tell the rest of the people that, he has nothing to do with them, right? But all this stuff backfired, because when His Majesty came to Jamaica, he actually, for the first time, invited Rastafari to come and sit and dine with him in the King's House. The King's House in Jamaica would be the Ghana equivalent of like the Jubilee House, right? The Flagstaff House, right? To come in and not only that, he also presented medals to Rastafari for two particular reasons. One, for the support Ethiopia received during the Italian oppression of Ethiopia, and also for hoisting up the banner of the red, gold, and green, the Lion of Judah, internationally all through this time. So this was also something that backfired. So we see that, the report was intentionally created to fail what the government perceived to be the uprising of the Rastafari movement. The mission to Africa also had a motive of, if the African governments accept Rastafari repatriation, then we are going to rid our society of Rastafari by sending them to Africa, where they say they want to be anyway, right? So, in other words, the motive was not a pure one, so to speak. It was one that was laced with the ability to rid Rastafari out of Jamaican society, because they found Rastafari to be something that was hostile, that was something that one could not understand, etc., etc. Now, when it comes to looking at Rastafari from the African perspective, we always have had the idea, even when we go back to ancient Kemet, we have the idea of divine kingship. We see this in ancient Nubia, we see this in contemporary Africa. And this idea of divine kingship necessarily is not limited to the person per se, but is also the position that the person occupies. So you talk about, for instance, Omahine sent you. Now, you didn't mention the Omahine's name, right? You mentioned the position of the Omahine. That is what makes the person who he is. So this idea is not foreign to Africa. It's something that is very much ingrained in Africa. And we see Africa applying the idea of divine kingship also to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I the. And we see that in Kenya, we have people hailing His Majesty, in the 1950s and 1960s, which one was not Mau Mau, which was not Rastafari, but they have come to their own conclusion about that as well. And then, as you mentioned earlier on, even the 1961 mission to Africa, when they came to Ghana, they already met Rastafari brethren in Ghana, and had discussions with them. Some of them were working in the state printing press, etc., etc. So this idea is very much ingrained. Of course, we have, by and large, been very much exposed to the Jamaican conceptualization and articulation of Rastafari, but it is also necessary to show and position Rastafari within the context of continental Africa that is, right? Because when we look at Rastafari, is not limited to Jamaica. Is all over the Black world. When we look at the origins of Rastafari, for instance, we can look right here in Chicago, in the United States, where we had the Rastafarites, people like Grover Redding, who went to the gallows, basically for walking around selling the pictures of His Majesty. Right here in Chicago, we have other early progenitors of Rastafari in the United States. And as Leonard Howell himself gave an interview to the Jamaican Gleaner when he was asked about Rastafari, he said that he was only in Jamaica to establish the tenets of the Rastafarites, which he had learned whilst he was here in the United States. So it is important to expand on this reach of Rastafari, not as limited to one locality per se, but as something that was or that is embracive of the entire Black world. And it's also important to see that there was this same fervor of Rastafari within the context of Ethiopianism that gave birth to the Ethiopian World Federation. Radio, contract. Right here in Chicago. And he was right not so far from here in a park called Washington Park. And that is where he came and spoke to the Black people of Chicago and by extension the United States. And he stated there that, I am not only the king of Ethiopia, but I am the king of Negroes everywhere, right? So, and this is a statement that not only did he make here, but he also made in other places and other parts. And
Ethiopia too. He said at home too.
Absolutely.
The Negroes, right?
Absolutely.
Negroes.
Yes, right.
Yes.
So that also laid a foundation for the Ethiopian World Federation, because when His Majesty sent Melaku Bayan to establish the Ethiopian World Federation, the idea that was tasked to Melaku Bayan was to organize Ethiopian World Federation everywhere Black people are found, right? So we see that Melaku Bayan started not so far from here in a city called Evanston, and then he took Ethiopian World Federation everywhere, to the Caribbean, to all cities around the United States, to England, etc., etc. And it's important to point this out, because His Majesty was not looking at Ethiopia just as the country Ethiopia, but was looking at Ethiopia in the context which we also identify Ethiopia as the land of the Black people, which is everywhere Black people are found, right? So,
thank you.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. No, I don't say stop, if you want to take out, I just thank you for saying that everywhere we plant our foot. Yes. Yes. So yeah, man, I'm gonna make you share some thoughts on this thing about the religion thing. Like the religion. How the report basically had some very interesting statements, like there be Rastas who are. I just quickly read a few things. You know, I know the time we crossed the time, but this one day, man, would love to make you elaborate on that small. So they had statements like there were Rastas who were extremists. You know, there were Rastas who were deranged. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they have things like the members range from the pacifists, right, on one end, to criminals, the mentally deranged, and revolutionaries at the other end, right? And at one point, too, they're talking about, you know, those who are into the political military approach, and then some Rastas who are revivalists, and those who are quietists, right? And then they start moving it closer and closer to the religion, right? Oh yeah, when we met them, or some of them, if you give them a little bit of time now, they will start praying and they will start to sing, right? So the rest of us who are not doing that, that's the problem. Basically, that's what they're saying, right? And I noticed that, like, if you Google Rastafari right now, where Wikipedia thing pop up, they could say a Judeo-Christian religion. I run into some white guy one day, say, hey, you know what we have in common? Yeah, we all share Abrahamic character. I said, whoa. Me, I'm from Africa. I don't know what this Abraham thing you to talk about. We don't think about that.
Radio culture.
We don't need anything else to help us to understand who Selassie be. You know, but I didn't understand, say, you know, people, where after the report for God come around and he started doing things too, wonderful things. But I feel say he think they really fit into this idea of Rastas are supposed to be this kind of, I want to call it missionary proselytizing Christian kind of project, divorced from the liberation theology concept of Christianity, where some of us have seen the Christ, somebody go to church, go whip them, and say it's been self for that. You know, go there, go tell us, excuse me, please, can you stop selling this? He whipped them. You know, if I look in the Bible, every time you go to church, you get in trouble with them, right? So I see a liberation theology thing that he's trying to set things right. He's not saying that this is what the authority is saying, because he did work with one authority, the Most High. But as he said, for us to say we have this thing right now where people like we're Christians and people hold it real tight and precious, but they fold it into the missionary framework and they start to compare themselves with other Christians, like those that, you know, Abrahamic mindset of colonial Christianity. That's what I want to call it, you know? So it'd be like, I mean, hear things like, oh, the Catholics have done this, why can't we do it? You know, the Presbyterians and all these people have got this, we should get it too. But they don't know, it's people who got their wealth through, you know, robbery and all sorts of things. And you're comparing it, their project is different. King Selassie is complete over here. And above them goes Selassie is the church. Right. You know, yeah, but I think, say, I could love make you talk a little bit about how the framework with the report they give us, they drive us that way, where you sort of feel like, say, it's almost problematic if you don't care about a messianic figure where it will come save you from your problems, where you go to heaven and all those kinds of things, where you talk about, say, hey, you know, we're looking at Black liberation. We're looking about the most, we all used to get up, stand up, but we still did talk about almost like, you know, that I go to heaven in Jesus' name still, you know. So, Bridget, just take it and tell us something.
True. Well, I give thanks for the words. You know, I think that it is important to also emphasize that if we are, or some of us, use the framework of liberation theology, there is nothing wrong with that. But I think that you can use things as tools to an end. So, for instance, we can take a knife, for instance, and that same knife that we can use to chop onions and cook food with, we can take that same knife and cause harm to another person, right? So I think that the end goal is what is important here. But what is problematic is that some people have now adopted a position within Rastafari, not within the framework of liberation theology, but within the framework of just faith. That is as part of the, almost like a Christian denomination, if you want to put it that way. I think that in terms of looking at the report, that could be a desired outcome of the report, because that then puts you in a position where you become passive, docile, And the divide and rule has really worked in that regard, where now you don't see Rastafari as something that was initiated to free Black people, right? But you see it as something that is limited to your personal faith per se, right? So within that context, liberation theology is taken up. But, the question also needs to be asked. I mean, do we even have to look at it from the framework of liberation theology, right? I think that there are various stages, right? Some people do need to be within that framework, and it's okay if they are using it as a means to an end. But then when we start hearing things about, de-emphasizing Africa, and emphasizing, things such as, or places such as Jerusalem and stuff like that, then that becomes problematic in terms of our struggle as a people. Because at no point in time, I think, should I de-emphasize Africa and advance another location of Africa. Some people have argued that Jerusalem is Northeast Africa, and that is true. But at the same time, for the past so many years, that land has been the site of contentious events between certain segments of the population there. So I think that as Rastafari, our focus needs to be on Africa. Our focus needs to be on His Majesty, Her Majesty. Our focus needs to be on liberation of I people. And if we are not operating within that framework, if we are embracing, for instance, what the report, which really created a lot of divide and rule, like defining some people as extremists, some people as pacifists, some people as basically mentally deranged. At the same time, this same report can take one Rastafari and use all these descriptions on that one person alone.
Very true. Quick one. One moment you're saying, okay, this is aimed to separate the smart, intelligent, rational, reasonable, realistic, religious from the mentally unwell, violent extremists. So basically, talk about the intelligent ones are the ones who are not like this, right? And then in another breath, there's a statement. This is coming from Smith, right? I think he'll have this quote. He say, the Marxist influence in this movement in Kingston, does not control 1/3 of the urban population, so it's not a problem that way. However, this segment is actively and effectively led. It is also highly intelligent, right? First, they deny them the intelligence. Right? They talk to the intelligent ones are the ones who are religious and reasonable and realistic. The Marxist ones are not. Then the same person will say, hey, these people are highly intelligent. So what does intelligence mean even? Why do we have to listen to?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they just throw the words around,
Yeah. And when we embrace that, then we start to seek to fit ourselves into these kind of categories. Who am I? Am I the extremist Rasta? Am I the pacifist Rasta? Am I the intelligent Rasta? Who, and some of us have bought into this kind of thing.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And I think that's where we need to diverge from the report, because as Rastafari, we are a people who determine for ourselves. We this is a self-determination movement. We don't sit down for somebody to define who we are. Right?
Sure.
Yeah, man. We define who we are for ourselves, and casting our minds back. I mean, look at how they fought Leonard Howard. Look how they fought Marcus Garvey. They fought Prince Emmanuel. Someone like Prince Emmanuel was beaten and left for dead. Like, they beat him so badly that they thought that he had died and left him to just perish, right? But not knowing to them that the man didn't die, and he was taken up and healed with herbs and all kind of things, and he came back and did the work that he had to do. So there is no Rastafari people who were not at the violence end of things when it comes to the government. It was the government, and it has always been the government perpetrating violence on Rastafari. And this we're looking at it for the context of Jamaica right now, but we can say the same thing in a place like Ghana. I mean, right now things may be much better than it was before, but
it wasn't pretty a while back, Charlie.
No, not at all. I mean, look, I mean, I know a whole lot of people who went through a whole lot of things, but even the elders who came before us, after the feet of all these elders who have said, look, in those days you could be in a church and you just reach a police barrier and the police will just point to your Rasta and say, hey, get out of the church, and they'll basically deal with you. They have to shave you. They shave you off. I've had instances of a brethren who literally died because of a confrontation over one city or something like that, where he ended up tearing up the one city note, and the police taking him into custody, and then within 3 days he had perished in police cells. So the state relationship with Rastafari, as especially the states that have emanated from the colonial structure.
Yes.
I've always seen Rastafari as oppositional because of I embrace of Africa at the forefront. We're looking at things from an African perspective. We're living from an African perspective, right? And the Queen of England's monarchy does not like that. They want everybody to be subjects of the monarchy. They want us to embrace the commonwealth, so to speak. Whoever the wealth is common to, as we know, is the British crown. So, we have to be very, very aware of such documents, of such things that are done by church and state to divide I and I. And, and once they divide I and I, they actually have the basis to rule I and I. And therefore, His Majesty says unity is the accepted goal. Unity does not mean that I and I have to think the same thing 100% all the time. That is not realistic.
Matter of fact, we need the varied ideas.
Absolutely.
Yes, we need that.
Absolutely. And we also need to understand that these varied ideas are not basis for contention. Like, just because I don't necessarily accept or take something that you hold dear, to myself as something that I will hold dear, and vice versa, that we need to be at variance with each other. Unity is accepted goal. That means that we have to have some things that we can work together on. And those things have to be the things that Rastafari needs and wants. And that when we come to the table, we are looking at deliberating on those kind of issues more so than, I believe this and you believe that. And because, like I said...
Okay, Charlie, this is nice. We could tie this into... I think someone wants to say something to what you're saying, I'm sure. So let's just use this to open it up for people to start to tie things in. Yeah, but to finish your point, and then if somebody wants to say something to that, I see Ras Kofi, you want to say something, right? Ras Kofi,
right, quickly, before, I just want to give an example to that. I know that things are not like that these days, but I remember, certain mansions, right, where, just a person from one mansion will meet another person from the other mansion in the street and just blaze fire on the person, right? I mean, how productive can something like that be?
Radio.
The person belongs to a certain different school of thought, right? So, fortunately, those things I don't think are occurring anymore, which is a good thing. But, back then, these things used to happen, So, yeah. Anyway, give thanks.
Give thanks, Russ.
Radio culture. Radio culture.
Oh, okay.
That's a bit I'm enjoying the reasoning.
Learning a lot. I hope that people go fit jump in, but quick one, say His Majesty visit Ethiopia, visit Jamaica a little bit after that. The senator in Jamaica said, why don't they stop dealing with the Queen of England, make Selassie rather be the King of Jamaica, They thought I think it was going to backfire on Rasta people, right? But it's the senator where I don't think they hail His Majesty, He just say, why don't we make Selassie the King of Jamaica instead? Yeah, you know. But I think I was thinking about when you said the effects, political effects, you know, on us, the reports framework. I did think say, okay, the Black liberation movement in the U.S., for instance, right? Many of us, Rasta, we stand as, you know, Pan-Africanists, right? But there be people where they take Ghana, where they be Rasta people, where they never hear of the Black Liberation Army, for instance. So people are feeling, I mean, we're upset when Mandela was in prison for what, 20 some years, right? 25, 27, maybe? 27. Yes. There be people where they did the U.S. fighting for the same cause, where they did prison for 50 years, where it's not on our radar, right? But we are into Pan-African. It's not like people don't want to know, right? But Rastafari seems like Rastafari is not dealing with some of these questions because of their micro-nationalism or certain ideas of nationalism that fall into this divide and conquer. I'm looking at my turf. We're trying to survive. You know, one thing with this rehabilitation thing was emphasizing, oh, you guys are poor. What you need is money. What you need is jobs. So basically, people, I'm looking out for mine. You know, if I could forget I got a job now. I've got some steady income. At that point, you'd be like, you're okay. You know, but if we go think about a little more like this person's business is my business. Let's just say, if we were to talk about unity, we have to try to know each other's stories. We have to know each other's histories, her stories, whatever we want to call it. But how much of that are we really doing? You know, I know you could say some to that, and you know, make a mouth for joining if a mouth for have angles where you know they want that we think about. Yeah,
true. Quickly, I think that you know, I a few minutes ago I pointed out how His Majesty formed the Ethiopian World Federation. Something that was limited to the African continent, but mostly, you know, the whole African diaspora. And I bring this in to also emphasize the point that we need to look at Africa in this time, not just as the continent of Africa, but wherever African children are, right? And when I say African children, I don't mean like children below the age of 13 or anything. I'm talking about the descendants of Africa. So if we say the African world, then that also includes places like Barbados, Guyana, all these places. I'm saying that to say that what happens in Guyana should be of interest to us in Ghana. It should be of interest to us in Togo. It should be of interest to us in Namibia, just as we have things that happen in Ghana of interest to us, right? It's a worldwide thing. It's an Ethiopian thing. It's a federation thing. One second, please. Let me just wrap it up right quick. So we can't just limit it to just the continent per se. And then secondly, we also need to look at where we get our sources of information from, right? Because whoever is providing us with information may also have their own agenda with providing that information. Whoever is telling us that we are separate from our brethren and sisters in the West may also have an agenda, right? So whatever information that we're gathering, we can gather from different sources, but we have to use our own lens to sift that information through and make sure that we are accessing information pertaining to things that are occurring in the worldwide African situation. So that if Mandela is jailed for 27 years and it's very important to us for the fact that he was trying to fight for liberation, then another brethren or sister from the MOVE organization here in the United States, jailed for 50 years, should also be information that is accessible to INI people in Ghana, in Namibia, in wherever, in much the same way as Nelson Mandela's information was. And I think that that is something that will key us in more to happenings related to INI people worldwide, more so than limiting ourselves to like Ghana or some artificially created country like that.
Mm-hmm. Think of Asata, for instance. She had to go to Cuba, right? She could have come to Africa. That looks like it's none of our business, So
yeah, brethren who went to Tanzania, right?
Was it?
I'm saying there are brethren who went to Tanzania. I mean,
yeah, but Tanzania did a good thing by doing that, you know.
Absolutely.
But like if we all could do that, you know,
Absolutely.
where you go say once you're there, nobody go to touch you.
True.
But we've come to that place where we see the thing where you talk about, say they are business, you know. So what's Martin? You have something to say or no? What's Martin? Come in.
My line is breaking now. I couldn't hear what he said. If you could come again.
I said, can you say what you said? I was just saying that, you know, like if we go fit, you know, Porfirio just pointed out Tanzania was able to you know, receive what they will call political exiles from the U.S., right? Like people who got in trouble over there, you know, Black Panther, kind of Black Power, you know, total struggle people, yeah. And we're talking about people like Asata, them, they could have come to Africa. If you say Ghana, the gateway to Africa and all that, that could have been a place where people could come and get that kind of protection. But our politics is not there yet. It looks like we shouldn't be like something. We should be able to think about it now and say, hey, these are things we have to. Right now, as we speak, there are political prisoners who in U.S. prisons. You know, Kwadwo, for instance, right? He's in prison for 50-some years. He's not been released yet. You know, and even nobody talks about him. Like for our business, say this month for free. You know, yeah, it's the people where they ask them, say if they're free right now, would you change your ways? And say no, I'll do the same thing all over again. Right? These are people who are committed to us on that level. You're not looking for your own safety, right? Your own, like people like, let me save myself. A brother like this is saying, nah. You know, so we forfeit give them political protection, you know. So our ideas will come to that place, you know. But yeah, Russ Martin, please tell us what you want us to think about.
Yes, I very well. Thank you very much for the opportunity, my brother. I like how you are coaching bureau. I like the coaching they give you.
What?
Yes. Now make I come to my point now. You know, one of my aunties was just celebrated 100 years. Culture. She told me that when she was young, there were people just like me who used to preach the same thing I'm preaching and the same things that we are talking about. I mean, this is to add up to what you said with when the Rastas came to Kwame Nkrumah, there were Rastas here preaching majesty already. Yes, I. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. Thanks for that knowledge.
Very well. Nice one.
Yes,
nice one. Yes, and you know, when somebody say Rasta is Judeo-Christian, I don't think man can dissociate myself from it, especially when I love the Lion of Judah and I see myself like a lion, a child of the lion, and then the Christian heritage of His Majesty. His Majesty was a Christian, was unashamed of it. He was unashamed of his Christian background, his Christian heritage. So when somebody says Judeo-Christian, I won't run away from it.
You don't have to, Russ. You don't have to run away, you know. But the point I was trying to make is this.
Yeah. And you know, the next thing is that, as you know, if you want somebody to understand something, you come to the person's level, and you see. So if somebody wants to use a scripture to explain something to somebody, I don't think that the person is limited enough to scripture. Somebody can use something else depending on the person's level.
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone agrees with you on that one. I don't think Porfirio said anything contrary to that. I'm not saying anything.
Just let me learn. You have there's a lot. Yeah, let me learn.
Cool.
Anokye, but
continue.
So that is what I like to say. I agree with everything you have said, but I'm only adding something small to it. You know,
I appreciate
so that we must feel comfortable with the tools people use at a point in time. Right now, things are going. You don't have to. If somebody says, you know, sometimes I say that if somebody says that they believe in the Bible, are you handicapped? Do you don't have to copy the Bible for him? You know, like somebody is trying to evangelize the person that don't believe the Bible. The person is quoting from the Bible, telling them to believe in the Bible. They'll be asking. There's so much in Christ you can talk to somebody about. So the tools you want to use, if somebody wants to use the Bible at the point in time, the correct the point in time, whatever he wants to use, and they can achieve that aim to make somebody understand, to lift someone to a higher level. I don't see anything wrong with that. And then, you know, when you talk about Prince, the people who received medals from his Emperor Haile Selassie when he went to Jamaica, I think if my memory serves me right, Prince Manuel was one of them. And if my memory serves me right, I think he bowed about 3 times before His Majesty. Yeah. So sometimes I wonder when did we start lifting up him up to the level of His Majesty? That's another matter. But I remember him bowing about 3 times before His Majesty as the only one who did that when he received his medal from His Majesty. So these are the points I want to lay across. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I like how you are putting Rio.
I think you're radio culture. Monday where Monday benefit from what we were to say. But you were
what is wrong with that?
No. Okay, but Raspartan, what you just said is very important. Monday agree with you when you say that whatever means we go use to keep us in frame be the thing, and that's totally Monday agree. I just want to raise a question about how this missionary thing, right? The way we're, the missionary frame is a particular framework, right? Even that, if you do good. But I'm just raising questions that we got to be wary of because it's tied to a colonial thing. I agree with you, Selassie was part of his Christianity, right? He didn't shirk it or anything, but it's the same man as Gavin was talking about. He identifies the same way with the pagan, what Europeans would call pagan. I know these are all translations of Amharic, right? When you say pagan, it could mean another thing. But basically, it's like if you're not Christian, Europeans call you pagan, right? So that's to say he identified with that fully. He identified with the Muslim fully. He also say that in the mystic traditions, what? For the Most High, it's all one. And he's the Rasta man, right? So Mali just try to emphasize that because when they see a lot of, I want to say, the incidentals are being emphasized. The things around His Majesty are emphasized a lot. And some of us are just trying to say, let's just remember, so when we say Rastafari, we be King Selassie we talk about. That'll be all. You know what I mean? So that'll be all where man they go. Yeah.
We all agree with you on that. We all agree.
Yeah. And I agree with you too. Totally. Yes.
Maximum respect.
Maximum respect, my brother. Yes.
Maximum respect.
Yes. It's brilliant. Jump love
Radio culture.
Radio culture.
Yeah, Medea. Yeah. The eye is listening to a lot of things. The eye also put some stuff in the chat because the best thing I can say is experience. Experience is the biggest teacher. And what I'm experiencing being home on the continent is nothing good. It's shameful for me to see this as a Rasta man, to see this as a person that is part of the council, a person that's been here in 2000 and now come home again after all these years, and I still don't see the Rasta community the way how I know a Rastafari community is supposed to be. Because when I first became Rasta, I traveled to Jamaica. I lived in the mountains of Jamaica. I lived amongst enough different Rasta ways, the Child tribe, the Vingi, and everything. But when I come home to Ghana, I'm still looking for my community. I'm still outside in the community. I'm still in Babylon. And most of the brothers that I thought I met, that I thought I knew, everybody's about their own thing, looking for something to chop. They have no time to show me love. And it's painful because I bought my life here. Everything I have, I bought to Ghana, thinking that, 2025 will be our time. Radio culture. We have to have a global government. We have to have an economical base. We cannot stay among these people because His Majesty said that the government will be on our shoulders. And right now, this is our time. But what I see in front of my eyes, it makes me just say, why? Why did I come back to Ghana again? tears just dropped from my eyes. You know, and thank God I know Pan-Africanists and different black organizations that give me a sense of hope. But when I talk about my own Rasta family, my own leaders, don't want to call no name, leaders of the Child Travel issue that made me a member up there in Medina, different people I know have abandoned me in Ghana. And it's painful. Brothers have sold me out in a Kuma village. So many things that happened to me here with my own Rasta family. You know, your brother comes from Sankufa. My own child tribe leader don't want to sit down and talk to me. Why? Don't want to know. It's very painful to live this moment. Yeah, and that's why I have to say, you know, I just think that us as Rasta
brother, as much as I agree with what you are saying, I sympathize with you. Don't you think we can find a similar situation in Jamaica too? Or any other place too?
No, I have different experience. But I went to Jamaica early in my Rasta liberty. But no, in Jamaica I saw what Rasta was about. How things are now, I just know one my brother that I reason with, which is Oppong, and the works that he's doing is great works. Because I feel the same pattern of what he's doing to try and make a global government. But that's what we need. That's the time we need to organize and centralize and come together as one. That's what we need to do. That's what His Majesty said to do. So otherwise than that, you know, it's just painful with being here. It's just painful, man. Imagine you coming to somewhere.
As much as I agree with what you are saying, let us bring solutions to the problems. Because we want solutions to problems. Everybody can bring in problems we is going through, but I want to put them aside and bring solutions so that all the vision that we want, the organization, the centralization will come to pass. But if we keep on bringing problems now, we'll forget about the centralization organization. So as much as I sympathize with what you are going through and what you are saying is true, let us bring solutions into the problems. Let us got some solutions to bring about, put it on board. Yes, I
have plenty of solutions. I could tell you a million solutions. I came up with ideas. Yeah, I have solutions. But everything I come with, they just knock it on the side. I'm the one that said about let's go green. I'm the one who said let's do certain things. You know, go green is a deal with Mother Nature. You go green.
All right, blessed love, blessed love, brethren.
Okay, yeah, I knew I was getting silent, but it's all right.
No, don't be like that, beloved. Don't be like that.
That's how I feel.
No, Rasta King. We are live on several platforms. Let's be civil about everything. Don't be like that, because we are sharing a platform. To make the platform something about the I's personal issues, I think it's unfair. We have a topic on hand that we are discussing, and it's okay to come in and bring an issue forward. This is not even the first time, because the other time you had an issue, which I personally sympathize with you as well. But to turn the whole, platform of trying to share intellectual discourse into a personal issue, thing that I don't think is fair to I and I. And I do appreciate the problems, and I do even appreciate the fact that you bring it on this platform. It's okay, but to make the whole thing about that, I think it's not fair to I and I. Just my peace of mind. Blessed love, give thanks.
Okay, well, I put some stuff.
Yes, right. So
I talked about Solomon.
Jamusa. Yeah, Jamusa, your concern is well noted. Daddy B, who is the leader of the council and also the leader of Church.
Yeah, I know him very well.
On the platform, and you would like to respond. So at this moment, we'll ask that you mute your mic so that we can have so that we can listen to the response and also have a decorous meeting. I thank you for that. Give thanks. So, Daddy B, please.
I understand everything. Safe and fine.
Greetings and give thanks for the upful reasoning. Though I joined late, I've been following and I appreciate the discussion of the report of the trip. Earlier on, I was with a brethren called First Man from Jamaica. He led the initiative to establish the first ever Rasta village in Jamaica, which subsequently had been replicated across the island by the likes of Jaboni Wela. And he even called his camp the real Rasta village. You know, so I and I as a people have gone through various phases. With regards to the report and the discussion and analysis, I like the vibe that is coming through. The brethren I was talking about earlier, First Man, is actually on a pilgrimage with the Dogon tribe people. And they're moving from Ghana to Togo to Benin. And it's an annual pilgrimage they do. And for somebody like that, he says it is necessary for Rastafari to appreciate the African tradition and custom that our ancestors had, and to appreciate the indigenous knowledge system of Rastafari. And then there's been ongoing conversations about like how one of the ones I've described the Judeo-Christian background, the origins of Rastafari, and how going forward, I can align those thoughts and concepts within the larger framework of African values, traditions, and customs. And I strongly believe out of these conversations, we'll be able to forge an identity that can cater for our very interests, backgrounds, and opinions. And I like one of the things that came out, that unity does not mean uniformity. And that's one thing with the council. The council is made up of various mansions. And as one of the ones know, each Rastafari mansion has its own unique approach to the issue of Rastafari. What we've sought to do as a council is to dwell on our commonalities and the things that unite us, rather than the things that divide us, like your tribe, who drink and who yam meat, and Bobo, AWF, vegan, and don't drink, don't align or don't mix with white. So far, we've been able to handle our differences within the framework of a unified approach to the issues that affect us. There's something I want to talk about briefly about communities, Rastafari communities. First man was asking, is there any Rastafari community in Ghana? And I said, well, apart from the camp in Amamole and Dua and a few places, Rastafari in Ghana over the past 4 decades or so that have been involved with the movement has not, apart from the fact that the Mamolian thing, we've not migrated into that concept of Rastafari villages and communities. And there could be many factors or reasons one can assign to that. In the West, the circumstance or the context is different. So in Jamaica or in the Caribbean, there's a certain position of Rastafari. So, and I find solely in our communal living. Earlier on, Prof and Razda, we were talking about the 80s in Ghana when Rasta was pretty much ostracized. Right now, the situation is changed. It's not perfect. It's not ideal, but there's been a vast difference from them time to now. And all through these years of Rastafari in Ghana, Brethren and sisters have been able to integrate within their communities. And those communities of solid that was there for the Brethren and sisters in the diaspora. Post the 80s, where Rastafari is not able to integrate, people can live with their families and things. The need for state communities have not been that pronounced. And I thought I'd like to put this into perspective so that like where Jamusa was talking about the absence of these communities, these could be some of the reasons why we may not have Rastafari communities that we call. People have been able to integrate within their communities and continue to live. Down the road, taking into account experiences like the Rasta village in what you call it, in Jamaica, Montego Bay that I mentioned. That Rasta village is a model that can be possibly replicated. It is like a craft and artisan village with facilities for tourists and both domestic and international tourists to stay. And these are similar to the Kwasi model in Iliati Water. You know, so what I will say in conclusion is that one, the report highlights a lot of things and the lessons for us to learn from them. And then two, how does the report impact Rastafari today and going forward? And so I'd like to thank Prof. Riro and Seven Fireside for this session. And like I always say, the multitude of counsel, wisdom is not lacking. I believe these seminars will contribute to and building our consciousness and preparing ourselves for even the greater work ahead. Give thanks.
Radio culture.
Give thanks.
Yes, I give thanks. African mean?
Yes, right.
All right. So, Ja beloved, radio culture, we live. So, Prof, I want you to deal with this for me. And before that, I want to make a quick point, though. So it's a point and then a question. But my point is this: the idea of the king God, the concept of the king God, I think it's also right here with us in Ghana, right? It's not something that's alien to us at all. Because if you look at the Ashanti people, for instance, they refer to the Otumfo as Nyame Kesie. Nyame Kesie, right? That's how they refer to him. It's one of the titles that they give to him, that they call him. Big God, so King of Kings, and that concept is really not alien to I and I at all in any way. Now, here's my question, Prof. The impact of you've looked at my question actually in the course of your lecture, but I want you to zero in a little bit for me. What was the impact, intended or otherwise, of that report on the Rastafari brethren? I'm looking at positive impact here, right? Because we've looked a lot at what it was originally intended to achieve. Obviously did not achieve most of that, but did it have an accidental positive effect on I and I as Rastafari? I would like you to tackle that for me, please, Prof. Give thanks.
Radio culture.
Radio culture.
There were some recommendations that were made in the report. I think that that could be surmised as positive. And I think that I brought one into question, being the fact that there was a recommendation made that Rastafari be permitted, so to speak, to be educated in the public schools without any possibility of teachers and headmasters trimming Rasta youths. that could be something that could be seen as positive, even though we have not fully realized that, because we still have cases every now and then coming out of places, Malawi, Ghana, Jamaica, Kenya, that allude to the fact that some people still want to trim Rastafari. There are other recommendations that were made in terms of housing. There were recommendations that were made, and I think that one of the positive things, unintended, also was the mission to Africa, because the mission to Africa provided an opportunity for the brethren who were part of the mission to be able to go back within the Rastafari communities in Jamaica and actually articulate to members of the Rastafari community what Africa is like, the kind of reception they received in Africa, etc. So that also spread on the desire for ones and ones to want to, if not repatriate to Africa, at least visit. And as we have seen, there has been only an increase since that time to this time in people wanting to visit and also repatriate and or migrate to Africa. So yes, those are some examples of the unintended consequences, right? And there are more that we can talk about, but I just wanted to give those two examples to kind of highlight that some of the things that the government, which sponsored the university to undertake that so-called publication of the report, came about because they didn't think about it in those terms, right? It was not their intention that, it actually can be said that the opposite was their intention. If they could get rid of, the population that they desired as undesirable at that time, then, that would be forever done with. But this also actually, like I said, the brethren coming to Africa, going back to the communities, the unintended consequence in those communities was to spur on more people even citing Rastafari in those communities and wanting to connect to Africa more. So, there are many other unintended consequences that we can talk about, but I'll give those as examples for right now, and we can talk about some more later on.
Give thanks, blessed love.
Rastafari.
Radio culture. Transmitting online.
Looks like Prof. Amatep has a thing to say.
Well, thank you, brothers, and thank you for such a very illuminating study and report on the state of the Rastafari community. And I really appreciate the way the two of you handle the conversation and distilling the details. For me, I think it has been a lot of learning digging into this report. Some of the issues that came up are very, very interesting, and even though this report has been in for a long time, it seems we haven't moved very far from where our ancestors were with the issues that confronted the Rastafari community. And part of this has been the way in which we ourselves somehow have allowed this victim mentality to, eat into us. A typical example is what our brother Jah Beloved, hinted on. Because if we don't actually move away from, the blame game and wanting to make this as somebody doing it to us, other than looking deep into the causes that we can begin to address, it will become a little bit difficult, and we will stay in the same merry-go-round conversation for a very long time. The interesting thing is that it seems we are in a very good place now to deal with some of the issues that confronted our ancestors, especially in relation to the issues that came up in the 1960s. And we are blessed to carry the same genetic trait as our ancestors, the memory of all the things and the struggles that has gone on. And I think where we are now, we have at least a little bit more knowledge to do some further work to take the mantle forward. So looking at the community today, and to hint on what Brother Bosco said, and some of my own work is really how do we take the movement forward from its current state, because we are now in a very material, world right now, and so if we don't learn the techniques of living in this material plane, it becomes very difficult. You see, typically, as the report was presented, if you see how they define Rastafari, they'll go into the ghettos looking for people who are dejected, completely beaten out of life. That is not a representation of what Rasta is. It's the same as when people are studying black people and they are talking about black people. They come and go to look for the uneducated, the unemployed, those who really don't know their left from right, and they'll collect their data and do the analysis and present this as representation of black people. It's the same when you are looking at definitions of what an economy is, who is poor, who is rich. This is the narrative. And I think we are a little bit more educated than we were probably 100 years ago, 50 years ago now, to begin to put out alternative views. But all alternative views, as I've always been saying, has to be backed by, intellectual facts. And that's what our brothers have just done. So I'm asking, can we take this report forward, do further analysis and synthesize it, and present some, scenarios, and these will be possible options. And some of these options could well be, how do we liberate ourselves mentally, as our brothers have already, said. But beyond that is, how do we deal with the economic situation that we find ourselves? And I think that comes to the communities that we have. And look, if it's just a little piece of land, we can turn this into, massive source of living for our people. Things like the credit unions that will empower people who need credit to go into several areas. Those who have creative, activities that they want to take further. Because with this type of empowerment, the way you look becomes almost inconsequential to whoever you are dealing with, because you also command the tools and the keys that will give you entry into those portals for which people are. And I can say, Prof, if you are walking there, they can't actually stop you and do the kind of things, the harassments that they do. It's not every Rasta that they do these kind of things to. So we have to raise our level a bit. I think our level of vibration so far, we haven't allowed ourselves to really tap into what we are truly, to begin to ward off these things. So these negative entities are feeding on some of the things that we ourselves are vibrating and giving back to them. And the kind of platform we have now really gives us opportunity to begin to think about how to arm ourselves economically. And when we are very well armed economically and our brothers are in prison, we can fight these cases in legal platforms because we have the pockets to take on any system. The system really thrives on our own ignorance, and that's all that it is. It's not really that so difficult and so tough as it has presented itself. Unfortunately, we bought into the lie, and that is the lie that is keeping on. So I really appreciate your report. I think we can do further with this. I'm quite happy to, see a paper come out of it and we can promote it. And on my side, it's really to put these things in a perspective that will be appreciated, that great minds have looked into this and they have analyzed it properly. And it can be presented in a way that will articulate solutions that will help us move at least some steps beyond where our ancestors were. So thank you very much, brothers, for this very illuminating study.
Radio, culture.
Thank you, Prof. Yes, you just said what we need to hear, so the follow through, right? So if there's the things to write, the things to present, and Prof, I'd like us to stay in touch and work together some more as far as the economics, like working with the collective. The RCG is working on some projects right now on you're probably aware of them, and I think we have to synergize more intimately, to get those things carried through. Because we appreciate your perspective on economics. We've been dealing with some understanding of economics that has not necessarily been helpful, but you're a breath of fresh air, so to speak. You come in with something that is speaking from where we stand. So please.
Kwasi,
yes.
When Prof said economics, mainly what came to mind was some handwritten, when I came to first year, you painstakingly wrote the speeches of His Majesty, except in your own handwriting, your beautiful handwriting, gave it to me. One of it said, you must engage in the commercial and economic activities of the motherland. I don't know whether you remember this particular.
Yes, I do.
Yes. So when Bob said that, His Majesty, I really told us to do that. Engage in the commercial and economic activities of our motherland. And I think that last time I was going to, like Bob suggested, and you're supporting. Give thanks.
Give thanks. So, Prof, please let's stay in touch and see how we can actually, do some things in these areas you're talking about.
Definitely, brother.
Alrighty. Studio time 301. It's time to sign out. The discussion is about to wrap up, but we will be we're gonna hang on for a little bit because I want to catch the end bit of it. If not, we should be wrapping up in a few minutes. Let's give it a few more minutes. We're still live on Radio Culture, live on iCulture TV.
Radio Culture.
Contribution. Rasa jokes. Yeah. Any more questions?
I'm learning a lot. All these are very alien to me. But thank God for these reasonings. I'm learning a lot. That's all I can say for now. Thank you, bro.
Yes, sir. Black militancy. You have a question, contribution you want to share?
Radio Culture.
Ras.
Yes. That's Martin, please.
Shouldn't a conversation be natural? It should be natural. Should we keep on inviting people into the conversation? They should want to. And also, I'm thinking about the number. When I entered, I saw the number about 9 of us or something like that. And look at the number of people on board. I mean, it's a static African here. But I think after doing something intellectual, can we look into the reason why we are having so few members? Is it the fact that they don't have the means, the economics? Why the low turnout, if I may ask? Those things, yes. Because there are 117 of us or something like that. What is the reason behind that? We have to be invited to contribute. There's nothing we want to share unless we are invited to share. It must be a natural conversation that we should be willing to contribute. The one love we talk about. Yeah, so let's begin to look into it. What is behind the low turnout and things like that? Give thanks, my brother. Give thanks.
Right move.
I think with the low turnout, people are having a very poor connectivity and monitoring the on and offs. You could see people coming in, falling out. So I think some of them have poor connectivity from where they are connecting from. I think those who have good connections have been very stable. And basically, I think some of them don't have good connections. And that is the reason why we have, technically, that is what I can see, why we have poor, the participation is quite low. But normally when we later post on the YouTube channel, people used to go to take a watch. So I think we will still be out there. Thanks.
Yes, Raz, I agree that the number here doesn't it doesn't really reflect. It's about 10% or so of the total numbers, and so we'll engage the platform to find out why most of them are not joining. If it's the time that doesn't favor them, or but I don't really understand, because sometimes during the day, a lot of people put up certain conversation, and it is born from such debates and other things on the platform that we thought, as resource persons are here, people will join this conversation so they can share their views, and then we can reason and learn from once and once. But we'll go back to the platform and inquire from them, maybe put out some questions, get people to answer why they are not, and then we can, if there's something we have to do, maybe advertisements or calling people. So whatever we get from the platform, we'll put it to work. If there are no more questions, comments, contributions, we invite presenters to give us their closing remarks. I give thanks.
Can I go? Can I speak? Can I go ahead? Yes. First to Rasejo. Rasejo, you have so much to share, so much to teach. So please, anytime you feel like, because you're a living model of how we for the move. I look up to you in many ways. The way you function, the way you take up, you keep promises, you take up challenges, and you act on them. Rastafari,
Yes,
so yes. Please, anything you want to say, we're all learning. So if any insights, and man will spend too much time talking about the things you do, where man they learn from, And then on the other hand, I want to add, say, the thing we talk about participation or people coming into reason together. I think, say, maybe our idea of learning hasn't been worked out. Seriously, our idea of reasoning hasn't been worked out. We haven't worked through it, So, I mean, I can expect some of these. I understand the technical things, the difficulties using the gadgets in these times and all that, Ghana, those are the connection problems, everywhere. But I think, say, the way we understand knowledge, the way we understand learning, it'd be something we will pay attention to. Because a lot of people, they think of knowledge in terms of what I will figure from this, in terms of, I will forget money, I will forget a solution to my financial problems, I will forget recognition, right? And it's that, but it's more, when we're thinking of what learning be, so that's one thing I had to think about. So what I think is a time, as Prof. Armitage was saying, and then Prof. Weirwords was saying this yesterday, I was talking to them, we have to produce knowledge, addressing our problems, coming up with possibilities, experimenting, imagining. Prof. Armitage was saying a number of times, creative thinking. That's something that seems to not be encouraged now. So we seem to be copying and pasting ideas a lot. That's what you're doing as work, and let's do it too. But if we tap into our own resources, using our imaginations, we go address the problems. Because like they say, every question has its own answer built in there. So that'd be the little bit I want to share with us. Thank you.
Yes, I give thanks for the reasonings. I think that I also want to push up a little bit on the economic front, because I think that one of the things that we also need to ask ourselves when we look at Rastafari and the Leonard Howell, very self-sustaining on every front economically, right? And then by the time the report is written, Rastafari is being now described as unemployed. So the question needs to be asked, how did it shift from being a very self-sustaining, very economically viable community to a community that, is being described as majority unemployed. I'm not necessarily saying that that description is correct, but even the ability to even put that description forward is something that should be questioned. And having said that, I think that, as Prof. Imhotep said, and I want to reiterate that, we are in a good position right now to look at some economic ventures that we can engage in. I know that the new government that just assumed power in Ghana is emphasizing, they're going to emphasize agriculture and also agro-processing, right? How can we tap into some of these ideas that they are putting forward? And by that I mean that, whatever we're going to do, we should eschew the old ways of doing things, right? By the old ways of doing things, I mean like a person puts forward for instance, their personal piece of land and then says, this is the land for the Rastafari community to do something on, and the Rastafari community comes and works, and by the time the harvest is ready, now the person is looking at the whole thing differently, like, this is my land, and what are you going to give me? I mean, I think that we should eschew that kind of model and go in for a model. For instance, if you want to farm, look at establishing something along the lines of a corporation that will allow every person who is investing some kind of return, will allow that the whatever land that we're going to use is an independent piece of land that is wholly rented or owned by the community and those who are participating. But I'm saying all this to say that, yes, there is a good opportunity for us to make some economic moves. And if we are, looking for acceptance, which we shouldn't be looking for, but actually more so working towards what our aims and objectives are. And when we do that, the acceptance that some of us are seeking will come. And one of the ways that we can do that is by looking at the economic front. What can we grow? Can we grow some pineapples? Can we grow some mangoes? What will it look like in 5 years' time if we have a mango plantation, for instance? There are many, many things. And, I think that if the economic front is good and money is going to members' pockets, then members will come and be part of the reason, because now they can afford data and be able to get on Zoom or WhatsApp, right? So I'm looking that, we look into that. And that will also fall in line with debunking some of the things that this 1960 report put forward, as if Rastafari cannot stand on its own, or as if Rastafari is not economically self-sustaining, which we have been from the very beginning. So let's look at some of these things as we move forward. I give thanks for these words, Rastafari.
Hashtag transactional acquisition. We worship God because of daily bread. And money economy must get to eat. They said.
Yes, so I know, my lords, we give thanks for your time, the knowledge that everybody for your contribution. Yeah, we always live on Radio Culture, and we appreciate the publicity. This conversation will also be uploaded on our YouTube channel, and we will ask once and once to direct people who need to listen to this conversation to also follow up on the YouTube channels. But most importantly, we hope the lessons learned from the 1960 reports will inform us on how better we can build a better Rastafari movement, not only in Ghana, but that will affect the world in general. So I give thanks. We'll meet next 2 weeks with another topic. So I give thanks for your presence. Rastafari.
Right move, agree.
All those who work behind the scenes to make sure that these
Radio culture, radio culture, GH reggae dance, radio culture.
To explain ourselves, they can't hear, can they listen, elaborate, can they feel it? They sell news in a oxy war.
Thank you very much for joining us on this one. We'll see you next 2 weeks with another subject or topic. One love every time we are.
They sell news. Just got back from my house. Holding ultra code phone. Cause dyslexia because of aphasia. Cause